My name is Ron Nikkel. I have been president of Prison Fellowship International for the past about 30 years. I've traveled the world, been in more than 1,000 prisons in probably well over 100 countries. I've seen the best of prisons and the worst of prisons, and I work with an organization that is dedicated to working for the transformation of lives, for reconciled relationships, and for restored communities in the whole area of criminal justice. Prison Fellowship International is a non-governmental organization that's really an association of independent prison fellowship organizations in 119 countries. Working in the prisons, working in the community, working with men and women when they come out of prison, caring for families, doing all kinds of different things that somehow bring hope and responsibility and restoration into the criminal justice system. Most people, when they're sent to prison, the first thing they experience is a sense of loss, loss of freedom, loss of ability, loss of control. Can't do anything about the problems that they've left behind, whether it's family issues or community issues, the loss of job for many of them, loss of friends, most importantly, loss of dignity, loss of respect. They lose their identity, they lose their name. And once you're in prison, responsibility is taken away from you. You're no longer in a position where you can take responsibility for your own actions, make decisions. Everything is done for you. And the thing that I encounter most when I go into prison and hear people tell their stories is this immense sense of disconnect from life. They're marginalized, they're out of the mainstream. They don't know what the future holds. You know, is there life after prison? What's going to happen to me? What will happen to my family? And for many people in prison, their families suffer the most. And a lot of them lose their families. And they can't do anything about it while they're on the inside. So there's this tremendous weight of loss, from not just the loss of freedom, but all of the consequent losses, not being able to do anything. You're powerless, you're helpless, and a lot of people just give up. You know, there's nothing I can do that can change my situation. And along with that comes a sense of anger. Anger against the system, anger against the community that put them there. All of those things tumbling in together create a very, very bad personal situation in terms of the psychology and the emotions of people. No, it's a very difficult thing. The scars of prison remain with a person forever. The founder of our organization, Chuck Colson, was only in prison for 7.5 months, but he still feels the pain and the anguish of that experience. It is such a humiliation, such a traumatic experience, maybe more so for him in that short period of time where he went from the White House to the jailhouse. I mean, what a huge social drop. And that's traumatic. But it's just as traumatic for anybody from a normal situation who is free one day and the next day he or she is in prison and there's nothing they can do about it. The scars of that experience and the experience of being locked up, being kept in an unnatural environment, an environment that is full of hostility and anger and pain and anguish, that stays with you. And then the trauma of re-entry into the community is tremendous. And I don't think I've spoken to anyone who's been in prison who will say, I've got over it. You know, it's okay. You start talking to them and hearing what's on the inside, you feel the pain. I don't believe that there is any institution in the world that can change a prisoner's character for good. I don't think you can change a person from the outside in. I have not seen a program or an institution or any kind of human effort that can make a person, let's say a bad man, good. It doesn't happen that way. It has to be a fundamental change in moral values, fundamental change in worldview and orientation, a reorientation to life and value system, all of that. And that doesn't happen institutionally. There has to be an inner change. I often liken it to a person with an alcohol addiction problem. The first step in recovery is to say, I have a problem and I can't help myself. I need outside help. And there's this appeal to a higher power. And I think it's the same thing in the area of criminality. There are people generally, and this is true for most, they can't help themselves. They make bad choices. There's a bent toward making bad choices based on their value system. And they need outside help. And it's a help that isn't enforced by an institution, isn't coerced by a program, isn't restructured through education, but it begins, as we often say, in the heart, where a person kind of finds their basis for meaning. There was a study done, I think, in the early 1980s in the United States by two psychiatrists, Samenow and Jokelson, who studied criminal offenders, both while they were in prison and when they were released, trying to determine what offenders changed. You know, what was it that caused a person to go straight after imprisonment? And they came to the conclusion that it was something akin to a religious conversion. Something happened on the inside that completely changed their orientation, their value system. And I believe that that is an encounter, a relationship with Jesus Christ. And in my experience, the only people I have seen make a radical, fundamental change in their lives are people who have had an encounter with Jesus. One of the tragedies of imprisonment is the loss of freedom. And what I find among people who have had this conversion experience, this relationship with Jesus Christ, is all of a sudden they find that they're free inside. And I find people who are more free behind the bars of a prison than I often do in the community. So it makes a powerful difference. And when a person is freed up on the inside, they do live their life differently. And I've seen people who are imprisoned for life, becoming an influence for good in a prison system. You know, I travel to prisons all over the world, and one of the things I love to do is listen to the stories of people who are in prison and people who've been released. And I meet a lot of people who have come out of prison, those who are now living productive lives, meaningful lives, contributing members of the community. I see people with new hope and new dignity. And every time I listen to their stories, I hear something very familiar. I met Jesus Christ. That changed everything. Everything is different. I have a new life. There are people all over the world. I've met them in Russia, I've met them in Argentina, in Yugoslavia, in parts of the Caribbean. Everywhere I go in the world, I meet people who've been transformed through Christ. Restorative justice is really a system of justice that looks at the outcomes of crime, as opposed to the retributive system, which is our normal criminal justice system that's all about punishment. And restorative justice looks at healing the damage done by crime. That involves offenders taking responsibility, victim-offender reconciliation, and some sort of restitution or repayment for the damage that's been done by crime. Well, the biggest challenge we face is the challenge of justice. We think that justice equates to judgment, to punishment, so that when a person has committed an offense, they're found guilty and they are punished. And generally that means lock them up in prison. End of story. Justice has been done. But it is sheer nonsense. That's not justice. Justice is about repairing the damage that's done by crime. And imprisonment doesn't accomplish that. In fact, we punish ourselves by putting people in prison. The cost of crime, the cost of imprisonment, coupled with the cost of crime, coupled with the unintended consequences of imprisonment, the social cost, the family that can no longer support itself because family members in prison, or the cost of a person's dependence on the community when they're released. So I think we have a real challenge here to answer a question about what we expect from justice. What are the outcomes that we expect? What is real justice? We haven't got it yet, and I often say that we call it criminal justice, but it's just criminal. There's no justice to it. I don't believe in being soft on crime. I think crime is about taking responsibility. Crime is not just about punishment, it's about being responsible. St. Augustine once said that justice without mercy is tyranny. Mercy without justice is weakness. But where justice and mercy meet, there's the grace and love of God. It's a point of healing. So we have to do justice in a way that incorporates mercy. So it's not being soft on crime. It's not just punishment, but it's about doing justice with mercy.